We have some great four personalities joining with us today. And I would like to first introduce Dipika, who is a philanthropreneur and is the founder of the HOW Forum and a corporate diva. Her organization works across verticals of holistic employee well-being and women leadership development. Her platform, Corporate Diva, aims at transforming women professionals into women leaders. The platform also addresses the upskilling and support needs of the entire life cycle of women professionals, and from getting women in universe corporate ready to realization, activation of emerging women leaders. She is corporate diva, and Deepika has done it all. So, welcome, Deepika, to our panel. We're looking forward to hear more about you. Our next speaker is Ritika. Ritika spent more than 17 years in the telecom and e-commerce industries, handling diverse portfolios in product marketing and program management. She's passionate about creating inclusivity and diversity and belongs at the workplace and is exclusively invested in this charter. Propelled by her passion for D&I over the last few years, she has leveraged her product thinking mindset to institute a design thinking approach to solidify a strong foundation and a data-based focus for D&I. Welcome, Ritika. It's great to have you here, and we're looking forward to hearing more from you. Our next speaker for the day is Puja Puneet. Puja Puneet is a huge influencer for a lot of followers on Instagram, and she's also a career and a life coach who's been transforming lives of many women across the years. After training under the likes of self-help heavyweights like John Gray, Mary Forlow, and Brendan Burchard, and Jack Canfield, Puja began her own academy, Life by Design, in 2011. Since then, she has hosted various workshops, graced the TEDx stage many times, and blogged extensively about her message. She has a lot of followers and a lot of people who have actually looked at her as a great mentor and who have actually sought her in aspects to their careers and as well as her life. So thank you, Pooja, so much. We are here and very excited to listen to your side of the story and the inputs that you have. I know you are busy with another one, I think, a full 24-hour session that's actually going on. So thank you for taking time out for this session with us. Our next speaker and our last speaker for the day is Nandini Sarkar. Nandini is a women leader who is part of the Global Equity, Diversity and Inclusion leader at Boeing. And with over 2 decades of HR experience, being a culture curator and an inclusion strategist, she has had deep and wide exposure in the domain of ED&I, L&D, OD, leadership excellence, mentoring, culture building, and change management, all earned through working across various industries like BPO, ITES, hospitality, telecom, professional development and placement consulting, IT services, and now she's in aerospace working at Boeing. So I think she's donned various hats across different domains, and which I'm sure she would love to share her experience with us on the same. And moderating this is our co-founder of Shevolve, Bhaduri, who will be joining us today and moderating the session. Over to you, Bhaduri. Please go ahead.
Hey, good evening. What impressive profiles. Okay, I'm so happy to be moderating this panel of powerful women. And good evening, ladies. I think the participants, this is your time to listen to the powerful and the powerful women and make the most use of it. I think Vandana did an excellent introduction of them all. Let me first start with Ritika Khullar. You have held very different leadership roles in various orgs and MNCs, I think the last one being Flipkart. My first question to you would be, what has changed for women in leadership since the last 3 years or 4 years? Because we see that things are changing. A lot of women are taking up women leadership roles. A lot of such platforms are coming on to existence. And we would like to hear you, what has really changed for women in leadership?
Thank you so much, Bhaduri, for that question. And first of all, congratulations to you and the entire team for putting together such a wonderful event and a great successful day one. So please, accept my congratulations on that. I have, like Vandana was saying, I have been in the startup space, I have been in the MNC space, I have been on the product marketing side of things, and now leading D&I. What I'm really seeing change in the last 3 years is, one, the women themselves. The women do not treat ambition as a 4-letter word anymore. They are shunning any misconceptions about good girls not being ambitious. They are asking for more and they're really owning their ambition. That's the first change that I see. The second change I see is within the leadership in organizations themselves. And what I mean by that is leadership is holding themselves to account to higher standards as well. They are approaching the very definition of leadership with more awareness of whether there are any gendered nuances to their definition and more curiosity to what terms of diverse leadership styles. Uh, for example, a woman who shows any sign of emotion today is not looked at as somebody who could be a weak leader, but rather somebody who has the courage to lead with authenticity, to lead with vulnerability, and to lead with emotional intelligence. The third change that I see, and for that, if the participants are willing, I'm going to ask you a very quick question, and you can put that in the chat window. When I say woman leader, what is the one name that comes to your mind? And I'm inviting if the participants and the panelists themselves can answer as well. You could choose somebody who is in India, you could choose somebody who's an international figure, you could choose somebody who is within your own field, within the corporate arena, or somebody who's outside. And I'm going to just read out the answers that I see. I am seeing Indira Gandhi, I am seeing Indira Nui, Kiran Bedi, Sudha Murthy, Lakshmi Agarwal, Hillary Clinton. Now, the one thing that I would like to point out here is there are very few who have made it just in the last 5 or 7 years. Most of these are people, that we have known for about a decade now. What I think is that the number of women in leadership is still a lag indicator. And I would really like to see more and more corporates step up to the challenge and have more women in leadership, translating the first two trends that I spoke about into actual numbers. So I hope I answered that question, Bhaduri.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you. I think I love that point of emotion. Women, emotions are no longer seen as weakness, but I think that's leading with authenticity. Yes, you have to exhibit that emotions of empathy and etc. when you really have to deal with human beings. Okay, that's a necessary trait. Thanks for that. Let me now go to Nandini. Oh my God, you have been a great advocate for Indian women by holding different positions of policy and advocacy in the Indian Women Network. I'm so flabbergasted with your roles and responsibilities, Nandini. So my first question to you would be, what advice would you be giving to women who would want to break into technical roles, the engineering or technology roles?
So thank you for that question, and a hearty welcome to everybody who's joined us for this much needed conversation, and really a congratulations to you and your team to put this all together and getting us on board. So sometimes it's the small things that matter. So there are kinds of professional experience of which almost any woman can relate to, coupled with the various social strains. Now, my advice here would start with working on self, because we are all work in progress. Now, overcome the fear of how accepted you would be at workplace. Stop asking yourself, what can I do to fit in? And start asking instead, how can I be myself in the work environment? Be intentional to inculcate a sense of belonging, hold your identity, and remain expressive. Build your mechanisms to defend against the more common minor outrages. What will work over time is to speak up without belligerence or defensiveness and fully participate with all that you think you know and you understand. For example, if you don't get share market, I don't. Volunteer a great movie you just saw or a book you just read. In meetings, when your ideas are not acknowledged, go ahead and recognize your colleagues' ideas, but add your own perspective. Recognize that many of our dominant group counterparts don't spend a lot of time thinking about these matters. And those in STEM in specific may never have needed to make interpersonal skills a priority. So when possible, it's useful to have a little compassion for these colleagues and to make a good-natured effort even to help them. So look at supporting the men around you by speaking up, helping them to relate to hotspots, thus building men as allies along the way, fueling sustainable gender inclusion at work. Remember, inclusion starts with I. So in any event, my experience tells me that there are two main steps to succeed with a strategy of not fitting in. The first is to commit to knowing your own mind and speaking it. This involves a difficult balance between trusting your instincts and technical certainty. The second step is equally important. So have the patience to get to that point of stature. When you do, you will find that having matured in your career and gained a reputation for competence, you will no longer feel like a minority in the room. It's you who will be defining the cultural norm of the organization. Induct mentors and sponsors consciously who will be a catalyst to your professional growth and self-evolution. The power of such relationships enable you to grow your muscles to be resilient, agile, and adaptable to change, the only constant. Hope that answers your question.
Wow. Yes, Nandini, I think to summarize, I think the two important things that you talked about is first conquer your mind. Then I think then you have the support system like mentors and coach, and then move on. Okay, you will be earning your positions on your own. Thank you for that. Let me go to Puja Puneet now. How would women support other women in organizations? Because I think there is a myth. I think I have to bold italic everything myth that people keep saying women don't support other women, but I think we see this is what we see in real life. Okay, so my question to you: how should women support other women in their organizations? How should we? We believe that lift as we rise is the mantra for Shevolve, and that's how we started at Shevolve. So if you can give us some tips so that every other woman creates the strong network and pull every other woman up.
Love it, Bhaduri. Thank you for having me here. Ritika and Nandini answered the question so beautifully. I have never belonged to a corporate world. So while I'm going to try looking like I fit in, the truth is I got married at 18, never went to college, have had a very different journey. But I would love to answer it from my perspective, which may be a little unique because I don't know how it works in the corporate world. But I can tell you, generally, I think women supporting women is the new way to go forward. And I do believe that it started to change a lot. I do a course called Goddess by Design where I have lots of women joining and learning from me. What I teach there is truly that goddesses have 4 avatars. The first one I call the Queen Bee. The Queen Bee is all about self-love, where you wear the crown and you own your power. The second avatar I move into normally when I'm teaching is called the Kind Angel. When you have filled yourself up, then supporting others becomes so much easier because you're coming from an abundance mindset rather than scarcity. So I always say selfish to be selfless. I think too many of us are giving before taking, and I think that's one of the issues that we're having at home as well as maybe even at work or even at corporates. Another one is the divine feminine, where we have a lot more faith and surrender to the universal powers that things will work out. I think a lot of comparison and jealousy would just go if we started to cheer one another and be inspired by each other's success, and knowing that, you know what, every flower will blossom at its own time. And that the best thing to not do is to compare yourself in your first chapter to maybe someone's 10th chapter. And the last avatar I teach is normally called the warrior princess, which is cut. It's called the sword. So cut the toxic people or the energy vampires, or how to just, get rid of all the politics that happens around us, or how to just handle the negativity that stuff brings. So I think between these 4, when we create our own little khichdi, as I say, and our own tadka on it, we can then start to support other women, but it comes from first loving ourselves. So beautifully, Nandini also mentioned that in a different manner.
Oh my God. I mean, this khichdi of these 4 avatars is awesome. Okay. Very powerful messages in just a 1-minute spiel. I love that.
Thank you.
Okay. Deepika, my question to you would be, I mean, I love that word called corporate diva. Okay, yeah, very lovely. Can you tell us a little more about leading like a woman with corporate diva? Because that really celebrates women for their strengths, authenticity, and intellect and their caliber.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bahadri. First, I'd like to congratulate this entire initiative. I think it's fabulous to bring in more and more women together to bring out the power in each of us. So thank you for the invitation. About lead like a woman, right? I think, I've always believed that evolution is progressive in nature. But we often hear the term lead like the girl, lead like a girl. But girl is also evolving into a woman eventually. And that's very different because, a girl is far more untied from responsibilities and the focus is very centric at that time. Whereas when you transition into a woman, you become the ecocenter of a lot of ecosystems and you literally are the anchor. And then you've got to anchor your own self and your own growth as well. So lead like a woman, what we do at Corporate Diva is, I think a lot of factors Nandini and Ritika as well as Puja mentioned, that it all starts with believing in yourself. I think when I started off with this initiative after being in the corporate, after being on a sabbatical, after returning back to career and then finding my true north as a philanthropreneur, is that, you've somewhere got to start loving yourself. And which is why the one thing that got me started was to make a woman fall in love again, this time with herself. That source of self-love is so potent, it's so powerful that then translates into everything else. More importantly, it translates into you owning yourself, your growth, your progression by making yourself a priority. And trust you me, especially in the Indian ecosystem, how many of us actually put ourselves on our own list of priority, forgetting topping our list? So I think self-prioritization is the step one when we address, leadership growth at Corporate Diva. Then, of course, is also making them aware of the nuances of leadership. And, if we just look back even a little, as well as the current times, leadership has always been very masculine in nature. It's always been defined as being aggressive, being, that very masculine avatar comes in when we talk about leaders. But I think the past 2 years have completely changed the definition and the outlook of leadership, because now is the time when we realized the importance of humane leadership, the importance of putting people first, the importance of paying it forward and building together. So that's one of the critical elements of leadership that we also touch base on. And then, of course, is how once you put yourself on priority, how do you continue a process of evolution? A lot of comparisons happen, especially in a women's ecosystem. We tend to compare ourselves constantly. We tend to seek validation outwardly constantly. We tend to be a bit too harsh on ourselves constantly. And that's where we encourage women to just step back and be kind to yourself, because you would be able to radiate only what you soak in, right? So if you're talking about kindness and being vulnerable yet being compassionate, which are core strengths of women, then start with yourself. Why leave yourself out of that, right? I hope that answers, Bhaduri.
Yes, Deepika. I think one common thread that I think that we heard from each one of the panelists is the self-love. Okay, you are the most powerful person in if you have to take things on your hand, but start with you. Invest in you and self-love. Okay, that will take you miles, because that's when I think you will be able to be very vibrant and then spread, and then and you can be authentic. Let me then go back to Ritika. How important is the role of a mentor for a woman in her career? Because I think once people in the previous session and in yesterday's session, one thing that we all felt is women have a lot of qualifications and extra, yet they struggle when it comes to taking choices. So how important is the role of a mentor for these women in their career to move up, to take any different decisions?
I think, Bhaduri, for women, it is all the more important to have a mentor in their career. Men sometimes don't even recognize that the presence of a mentor in their career, because relationship building, networking is kind of coded into their ways of working already. Women who might be turned away from all these networking, these old boys clubs, may need a mentor to help them in their careers. And when I say mentor, I'm actually asking people, I am demanding people to look beyond the traditional definition of a mentor. A mentor may not necessarily get your world. It's not important for a mentor to have gone through the same life stages that you have. In the spirit of leading with authenticity and vulnerability, I remember once I had an episode where my presentation was completely damned in front of the leadership team. I called up one of my mentors crying, saying that I have like my career is finished. This is what happened, and he asked me, "Is this the first time that your presentation has bombed?" And I said, "Yeah." And I was quite embarrassed about it. I had been working for more than 15 years. He said, "What did you think? You will go through your entire career without having failed even once? What kind of an expectation is this? I don't get it." The fact that I had been a stellar student, the fact that I had been on a fast track in most organizations, I was just not equipped to handle failure the way he was. He had kind of just squirmed his way through his engineering, getting one KT, repeating one subject, and so on. And he said, "This is part of life. You will get over it." And the way he, just diminished that experience and saying, "It's just one presentation that bombed." It's important to have mentors who may not get your world as well, in addition to, of course, mentors that we seek who understand what we are going through. The second thing that I want people to understand is mentors may not always be senior to you in terms of their accomplishments, in terms of the years behind them, in terms of their seniority in an organization. Some of my best learnings have come from people who are junior to me. This girl would come up to me after a meeting and she would tell me that, "Hey, I think this you did well, but you can improve 1, 2, and 3." It was coming from such a good place, and I knew that she was invested in my growth as well. The third thing that I want to encourage people to think about is mentorship may not be an ongoing relationship that people sign up to. "I'm going to mentor you for 6 months or a year." Sometimes mentorship could be just one conversation. And I have had conversations, with sometimes peers, with sometimes people that I look up to, who just with one conversation will help me see a perspective that I was otherwise missing. So think of all these three as you think of mentors, and your life will never be the same again.
Thank you. Oh, that point on dealing with fear of failure, fear of judgment, I think women often tend to be that perfectionist, okay, and then have this mindset of not being able to get out of it and then compromise. I think that's probably leads to a lot of our other emotions of guilt and etc. I think you wonderfully put it with your personal example. Thanks for sharing that example, Ritika. That was really helpful. Let me now go to Nandini again. I think you're in an organization like Boeing. There would have been situations where you had probably that one woman in that room being in that leadership role. That could have been. What are the challenges women really face when they really enter into male-dominated industries, and how do they have to deal with that?
It's always that feeling of that I'm a minority. That goes without saying. But let me kind of look into some facts here, and then we can deep dive into what are some of those challenges that one needs to ascertain. So we have seen the All India survey on higher education that women in STEM, especially those who have opted for STEM, have increased in the last 3 years. And we do a fair job when it comes to 43% in STEM at the tertiary level. And in developed, and we are also leading the way when it comes to that of US, who's trailing at a 34%, or a UK who's trailing at a 38%. Even the UNESCO Science Report 2021, I think, found that women are still underrepresented in fields such as computing, digital information technology, engineering, mathematics, and physics. Now, only 22% women are in AI jobs. Now, UNESCO's findings also echo those of the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report 2021, where we've seen that we've been pushed by a generation from 99.5 years to 135.6 years to reach the stage of gender parity. Having said that, the problem is real. Organizations are all mindful of what is their responsibility here, because it has a huge economic impact with respect to the GDP of the country. And a recent research report by McKinsey said that narrowing the gender gap alone can lead to an increase of 12 to 28 trillion US dollars in the global economy, in the field of STEM. Now, are we hearing? How is it all translating into job opportunities? India's female labor participation rate has gone down 16.1%, hovering around that. And we know women are underrepresented at the top multinational tech companies, despite efforts to close the gender gap. Now, this gap remains in technical as well as leadership roles, and it further has widened. The demographics are weighed too heavily against women in most cases, and the corporate culture too steeped in male influence. Now, under the circumstance, even the sensitive men tend to make only token efforts to accommodate themselves to women. So efforts to blend in will not only end in frustrating feelings of self-effacement, they'll be futile. Now, I always kind of try and bring into how do I build myself adaptable and agile enough to brave the change, because I mean my career and I have my career aspiration. So it's always wise to be prepared, future-proof, and look for solving the adaptability paradox for a long term. So becoming adaptable is the only way. Challenges like gender stereotypes does exist. Social strains and the phases that a woman goes through in life exists. Male-dominated culture and the influence exists. The typical challenge that women face is with respect to fewer role models. And another critical context that's coming up in the conversations is with respect to pay gap. The promising side is diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations are at an all-time high. So corporate world have realized that diversity within organization and teams is associated with improved productivity, creativity, organizational sales, and profit. So it all makes economic sense. And why am I highlighting that is because it makes an economic sense. It finds a point, to be a point of agenda in the boardroom, because diversity fuels innovation and amplifies brand value. Hence, women in workforce leadership and in boardroom really is a very critical dimension in building organizational sustainability. Now, some mantras that women could adopt. No, invest in self-awareness. It all starts with as I said in my opening response to the question. Know your career aspirations. Know the reasonable accommodations you would need to make along the way. Speak up to those who will remain a critical player in your professional journey. Get apt support systems in place as you pass through those life phases. Continue to challenge yourself out of your comfort zone. Demonstrate that you are up for a challenge. Keep the conversation channels open at all times. Take charge of your career. Study the job market by your skill and proficiency. Very, very crucial, because that way you will be able to sharpen your negotiation skills. Manage your emotional triggers well. Learn to label your emotions to manage stress better. And personally, I would say, I think I'm echoing all that we've been saying so far in this conversation. It is okay to be not okay sometimes. And it is okay not to be 100% perfect always. Weed out the guilt syndrome. Women suffer from guilt most of the times. Weed that out. Don't be harsh on yourself. Remember, self-love and your emotional well-being are critical components to build a successful career. I'm sure if you manage yourself well, nobody can stop you in your leadership journey.
Oh, Nandini, thank you so much for that answer. I think the self-love and investing yourself and taking charge of your career, and I think earning it on your terms, that's the most important thing. I think opportunities are abundant because the countries are realizing, the MNCs are realizing, and there are opportunities. But I think if women can prep themselves to earn it and then keep stirring it and not to find a balance, that would be the greatest thing that they can do it for themselves. And I think at some point of time, I hope not, it doesn't take that long to create that parity. I think if we can all work together, we might even accelerate that to break that parity problem. Puja, let me come to you. What, according to you, makes an effective leader, or the contrary?
For me, an effective leader is all about showing people the vision and then setting the culture up for it so that they know what exactly they need to do. I think for any kind of leadership, you have to become the role model, not the authority who is commanding. So while in the corporate world, I'm sure there's a lot of do's and don'ts. For me personally, I think all of us women are in some ways leaders, even in our own homes. So we are leading we are being the support system. We are leading our children into their journeys. We are supporting our spouses. So I think that at every place, I think having that communication to be open to hearing what the other person is interested in doing and how we can marry what they want to do with our larger vision. I think if that happens, that to me is true leadership, where their personal agendas plus your overall agenda gets married at some point, and that sweet spot, I think, is the best kind of leadership.
Wonderfully said, Puja. I think what you said is, at home, we juggle with so many things, we deal with so many people, we deal with so many emotions, and we are able to still find that sanctity with everything. If you can apply the same to the organization and then maximize the strengths out of it, very nicely said. Thanks for that. Let me go to Dipika. I'll take one more question for Dipika, and then I think there are questions in the chat. Probably I will take that as well. Dipika, in your experience, what are the main challenges that women face in their leadership journey?
That's a beautiful question, and I love answering that, because I think the biggest challenge that women face is the log kya kahenge syndrome. We're so always consumed with what if, what will they say, how will I be perceived, am I doing it right? We're on a constant journey of self-questioning, right? Fully knowing our credibilities, and that's something that is challenge number one. Challenge two is that in line with this is the imposter syndrome. Am I good enough? That constant thing. And now with an online world, with so much of social media and those smiley faces on social media, and if you go on LinkedIn, everybody is Harvard certified, trust you me. So then comes a question that, am I good enough? And that again, that vicious cycle of self-doubt, because I recently had this experience with one of the mentees on board, and we were doing a regular cohort. And then at the end of the cohort, just for fun, we kind of announced the winner and, identify a couple of champions, purely from the intent that, we highlight certain aspects which you know from a group itself you can imbibe so much. So why not? And then the other day I had a conversation with one of the participants because she didn't seem that bright, and you can pick those spots up, right? So she said, Dipika, you know what? After the cohort, I felt like a total loser. My name was not mentioned as a winner. I was not one of the champions. And I just feel devastated. And I, took the conversation forward and said that, all right, let's just spin back a little. How relevant was that announcement of the winner or the champion in terms of, we women in particular need to choose our battles carefully. I love the fact that Nandini highlighted that, you've got to kind of be in charge of your emotional trigger factors. Let not this whole thing of winning and losing be so important to us that we lose ourselves in the journey. That's one of the things. Then, of course, again, I resonate hugely with what Nandini said, lack of role models. Even now, I was reading a Forbes article, and they said that, even in the Forbes 500, there are only 27 women that are mentioned. So do we have enough women role models? And if not, then what are we doing to build more role models? And like Nandini said, that again, conversations on D&I are at the peak. One is really looking forward to that translating into, practicality and seeing more and more women. The next thing is somewhere down the line, perfectionism is a lot spoken about. And that's been my experience as well, interacting with men as well as women, from a diversity as well as gender gap perspective. There was this organization that I was consulting, and, there was a very, a situation that HR brought forward, and they said that, it's an interesting incident and we'd love to share that with you. There was an internal job posting. There were two credible candidates that the organization internally, were pinpointing on. One was a male, one was a female. Now, in comes in the time for, the interview session for that job posting. And the man walks in with a complete roadmap of what he's done so far. What is he currently adding value as a professional, as an individual in that space? What is it that he sees from here on, and how can he bring more value? And pretty much the entire roadmap charted out, right? A woman walks in, which later on I get to know that the organization felt she was far more credible because she was far more productive in her deliverables. But she walks in and says that, I first want to ask you, what got you to think of me for this role? Can I circle back to you after discussing it? Will I be able to do it? Am I good enough? All of those questions come in. So not that the woman was not credible, not that the woman was not prepared enough, but the fact is that men grab opportunities that come their way, even if they're 60 to 65% prepared. And women consider opportunities as a maybe only when they're about 110% for it, right? So I think we've got to broaden our scope of learning as well, that you can learn on the way. You don't have to be perfect. And therefore, I don't give into these super moms, these superwoman, tags that women get, because that adds all the more pressure on our performance, and then puts us into a cycle of guilt as well. That, hey, I'm not a super mom, I wasn't there for my child's PTA, or I'm not a great cook, or I can't cook well for my children. There are just so many things that keep on and on and on and on and on bombarding us. Where do we, find that true little heart of ours and say that, you know what, give yourself a shot. Just go on, give that try. Cut the noise out, cut the clutter out, just own yourself. And like Ritika mentioned, that be open to falling. There isn't, often I ask this question, and please, the audience, feel free to reply on the chat. What do you think is the opposite of success? A quick one-worder that comes into your mind. What is the opposite of success? Can I see some quick chats coming in? any word that comes into your mind when you say the opposite of success. Disappointment, failure. Nandini, you and I must have been soul sisters, right? Because you just read my mind. So yes, often when we ask what's the opposite of success, 95% of the time one says the opposite of the success is failure. But trust you me, when you sit back and ponder, what was the time when you learned the most? Was it at your peak or was it at the lows of life? 99% of the time, you would have gotten great lessons at the time when things weren't going your way. So the opposite of success is not failure. The opposite of success is not trying anymore, giving up, So therefore, there are numerous challenges, but trust you me, the only key to unlock that lock is yourself, and therefore the I.
Lovely. Yes, I resonate that opposite of success much more with you, Deepika, because I have been through that journey. Okay, I think the significant learnings that I have ever got is when I had times of low, when I had been rejected. Yes, I agree that.
I'm going to quickly add on that, Bhaduri, and that's just because we're looking at returning career women here. And as I mentioned, I was also on a sabbatical, and I also treaded my way back to my career. The entire organization of the HRW Forum and Corporate Diva has been built on my biggest low in life. There's another story altogether on that. How did that happen? But trust you me, your pitfalls can be the most opportune moment. The onus is on you, whether you want to let that go and feel low about it, or you leverage it as an opportunity and bounce back on the trampoline.
I never ever dreamt of starting a private limited company, other than this. The whole journey of Shevolve started when I was at my prime low. Okay, another example. Okay, so I think these are lot of lessons, lot of practical examples coming on this way, my dear participants. I think if this can inspire you to do something extremely different, or the things that you love, I think you really have to listen to it probably again. I remember a quote by Roosevelt, okay, which says, do one thing each day that scares you. My God, that was such a powerful statement. Okay, I think that whenever I feel low, I go and look at it, and then I say, I'm going to do something very different. Okay, for example, I think even if it means to go and do a different haircut, okay, don't be bogged down about your looks and etc. What the world will think, what if I fail, what if I'm judged otherwise, and etc. I think you own your journey. You self-love. If you can love yourself, I think you can go and do anything on this earth. So I'm going to take the questions on the chat probably, okay? And this question, probably I'll take it up with Nandini. It says, the question from one of the participants is, how do we make allies out of men? Especially when you are the only women in the team in the senior role.
Brilliant question. I think allyship is a big piece in the scheme of inclusion. The first and foremost requirement to build allies in men around us is to ensure that we are in a psychologically safe space. And I'm sure when we are in a psychologically safe space, when I feel safe to express myself, my thoughts and opinion without being retaliated or judged against, I should be in a position to place my thoughts. Once those things are placed, it's very critical to have a structured conversation, because without the impact that a particular situation or a moment has led into, and what could have been done differently to tackle it differently and make it a more inclusive and a comfortable lived experience, depends on how we are communicating. So first, have a psychologically safe space, which means you have enough trust environment and safe environment with the person that you are trying to express. Show through a structured conversation what the situation was, what was the lived experience in terms of impact, and then show how could it be done differently had it been done in a way like A, B, and C, and then see what is the response coming from the other side. But remember, this is just not one conversation. The conversation needs to continue, and through one, you will build a league of allies. And that's been a conscious effort. Equity, diversity, and inclusion drives and nudges. And I guess that's where equity, diversity, and inclusion today is becoming a big, big responsibility of the business and functions, other than the center of excellence or HR function for that matter. Hope that kind of addresses your question.
Yeah, I think so. That has come from a participant. I really don't know who has asked the question. So let's wait if before they type. I'll move on to the next question to Ritika. As a D&I leader, what are the 3 most important attributes women need to upskill while starting their while starting back their career journey? What are the 3 attributes that women have to upskill themselves?
It's a very good question. The first thing that I would ask them to start with is a very hard look at facts. For example, if you were in STEM and you were working on XYZ technology, but the world has moved 2 steps ahead, do you need a bridge course to come abreast so that you are comfortable working on platforms, working on technologies where the world has moved? That's the first very objective, fact-based decision that you need to make. The second thing that you need to do in terms of homework is find out which are the organizations, which are the hiring managers that are giving up bias towards hiring people who've been on a career break. There is absolutely a bunch of them today. There are so many organizations that have done the work. There are so many hiring managers who've done the work where they recognize that putting unnecessary questions to a candidate on what did you do in your career break, what skills did you gain, etc., is an absolute useless question. What you should be focused on is what are the skill sets that the candidate brings to the table. So what I would request you to do is, as number 2, do not apply to organizations that have any kind of bias towards hiring women who've been on a career break. It will not work out in the long term. And the third thing that I need to speak about, which I think Dipika also touched upon earlier, was find your social support. If you have been on a career break, when you come back to your career, you will need support both at work as well as at home, because there was work that you were attending to, whether it was caregiving work, whether it was household responsibilities, that somebody else need to pitch in as well. Similarly, at the workplace, you need to have allies, which Nandini spoke about, and how to create allies, I think, is a very, very difficult conversation. But Nandini, I love the way you simplified it. Having these 3, I think, is extremely important as you navigate your way back to work.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Ritika. Puja, maybe I'll ask this question that has come from the participant as well. How do we develop the emotional intelligence?
How do we develop emotional intelligence? Interesting. I think for me, knowing what understanding firstly what is that emotion, where is it erupting from, is it coming from something that's happened before and we've just created a file of it? Because I always say our mind does 3 jobs. One job is to protect us, of course, so it's always trying to protect us. So anytime we're trying to get out of the comfort zone, it's going to bring fear and doubt and all of those overwhelm and all of those negative emotions show up the minute we try to get out of our comfort zone. The second thing it has to do is give every situation a meaning. So whatever happens to us, we give it a meaning. What does that mean? Let's say your co-worker at work was having coffee with another person, and as you saw them, you heard your name. Now you have to give it a meaning. Are they discussing good about you? Are they discussing bad? Are they gossiping? What's happening? We give things meaning. And once we give things meaning, then the third thing we do is we start to look for evidence to prove ourselves right. And that's where the danger comes in. So the last two being very, very dangerous, because if we give a negative meaning or a disempowering meaning and we start to look for evidence, a time will come where we'll be carrying a whole file of why we are sure that the world is against us and not for us. So I think any sort of emotional intelligence is all about living the examined life, where you step back and become the observer of your life rather than only the experiencer of your life. Because if the only thing you're doing is experiencing it, then you're totally in it. And when you're in it, you cannot have that overview that you need. So I think that to me is very important, that as more the emotional maturity, the more is your ability to step back and respond rather than react. And I think choosing our responses according to what we are feeling, like anger, we should understand what is anger. If anger is our inability to control the environment to match our expectations, once we know that, then how we handle anger is very different from letting or allowing it to just show up and then reacting as if it's a reflex action. So like that, do we understand guilt? Do we understand resentment? Do we understand anger, comparison, jealousy? Every emotion, when deeply understood, can be managed so much better. Unfortunately, these things are not taught in schools, so I think we all struggle with it at different points of our lives.
Lovely put, Puja. That's what I would say. Okay, I think the way, if you can come out of it and observe it and then respond to it, much more, you probably one can be more objective. I mean, that's very nicely put. I have one more question that has come out on the chat, and probably I'll take that to Deepika. That's on what is all okay for a woman in a male-dominating corporate team, and for the women being so ambitious to climb the corporate leadership ladder. How accommodative or how resistive can women be to bear for the women in the male-dominating corporate team?
That's a good question. But before that, beautifully summed up, Puja. I think your answer reminded me of a beautiful quote which says that the mountains that you carry were meant to climb. So we've got to understand those emotions and give a logic, a meaning to them. Coming to your question, I think we are in a women's forum, and yes, I myself invest myself into building women leaders, but somewhere we've got to look beyond the gender. We've got to start talking equal leadership. We've got to start talking about especially in organizations, employees that are bringing credibility, that have the competency, that are productive towards a common goal of the organization to the table. And the lesser we, most of the times in my experience has been that we also ourselves discriminate ourselves from, in terms of gender. So I think we've got to somewhere silence the noise on the gender beyond just the male-female aspect of it. We've got to shift the focus towards credibility, towards deliverability, towards what do I bring to the table. And when you question yourself that what am I bringing to the table, that's where you're answering and kind of silencing a lot of noise on basis your gender. Because at the end of the day, if you're performing well, the organization isn't really worried much about your gender, whether you're male or female. In fact, given the diversity talks that we are having, it'll be wonderful for them also. And trust you me, they're also on the lookout to have more women in leadership. So I think this conversation of men versus women. Another aspect was which Ritika as well as Nandini highlighted was on allyship. In my experience, and I can tell you, these are the men that don't actually come forward, but there are also a population of male Samaritans that enable women's growth in their leadership journey. And I think we should bring, when we're talking role models, we should bring those role models forward as well. A lot of men on the silent mentor women, give them guidance, and all of that. But what gets highlighted is the masculine part of it, which is why we perceive the culture as masculine. The moment we bring in these male individuals possessing qualities that are of compassion, that are of equal leadership, highlighting those are the changes that we need to bring. So I think it's let's shift conversations from gender to more equal leadership, and let's not think any less of ourselves when it comes to credibility. And I always say, if the foundations of your subject matter expertise are rock solid, then all you've got to work on is yourself, to put yourself out at the table. And like the saying goes that, if they don't invite you to the table, bring your own folding chair and seat yourself at the table. And my addition to that is, don't be a backbencher. Bring that chair right at the front of the table and sit in the front row. The more we take these steps for our own selves, the more subtly we are giving cues to the population around that we exist. And the more we make them understand that we exist, the more we will be invited. If not, as I always say, always carry a folding chair and do not make yourself a backbencher.
Wonderful. I think it has been very, very excellent 55 minutes of conversations with the panel. I think all of you shared excellent points for us. I think the one, if I have to summarize, I think having a good bit of self-care, self-love, investing in yourself, finding allies, like all of this takes patience, and don't be caught in the circle of the self-guilt and etc. But then earn your seat in the table. If that means you have to bring your folding chair, go ahead and do it, okay? And be happy about doing it. Be bold in doing that. I think those are excellent points that I think has been shared. I hope the people who have been listening this 55 minutes had an excellent points that they would apply day to day. I think small bits of it, if you start applying it, I think you will be able to reach what you want. And always take the help of, a lot of these people have shared their LinkedIn contacts and etc. And then invest in yourself and take time to connect with them. Take time to ask for help. I would say fearlessly ask for help, shamelessly ask for help. This is what I would leave it. And then I think before I close, probably I will let Deepa of Shevolve talk about for the next couple of minutes, and then she can take it from there. Over to you, Deepa. Thank you so much, all four of you. I loved every bit of the interaction with each one of you. Thank you so much. The pleasure.
Thank you, Bhaduri. Very pertinent questions. And I think just one thing that I want to add on. I know I'm just jumping the gears here, but one thing that I really want to add on, especially it being for returning career women, and I've been through sabbatical and coming back, we often shy away from that sabbatical, that career break. I, for the longest time, did that as well. But what I realized today, 2 decades down the line, is the fact that today I ensure that I mention that on my CV. And I actually call it the OCLT, which is out of cubicle life training. So I was out of cubicle on life lessons and on life skill training, and I wasn't out of work. I've probably gained more than what I could in the 4 walls of the cubicle. So don't underestimate the learnings of life. And from here on, please do mention on your CV proudly that you were on the OCLT, which is out of cubicle life training.
Thank you, Deepika. Yesterday, we had a session on resume building, especially for people, women after career break. I spoke about these points. Thanks for that. It reiterates the point that that's an essential one. Don't shy away from by not sharing your break. Be honest and truthful. Thank you. Over to you, Deepika. Sorry, Deepa. I'm so sorry.
Thank you, everyone. I know we are towards the end of the session. I think it's a lovely conversation and amazing. I think each one of you really took time to put a lot of, I don't think even if you're spending 2-3 hours reading books, I think it's more than that. So it's our pleasure to host all of you today. And for the past 2 days, it was a great learning journey for all of us. I think both myself and Badri, the great reason for us to come together is as Badri say, lift as we rise, right? As women, we need to support each other and then create that community of women where we can empower them and then have that satisfying career, right? Like end of the day, career is different for each one of us. The career can come in many format. So Shevolve as a platform, that's what we want to do for women, help navigate that career if they feel stuck, or if they really want to come back, or what kind of career guidance or mentoring. Especially our focus is going to bring that connect, right? Bring that connect. There are a lot of women who are willing to support, really want to support each other, and there are women who are looking for help. So we really want to connect these two groups, which will help both of them to come to a place where they channelize their energy at the right space and help the women to navigate their career successfully. The whole purpose for us to come together is again to prove a fact that women support each other, and we really want to create that system, right? Like we have to fast track this. And thank you everyone for joining us. So